Hey there, are you trying to figure out how to actually build and form habits in your children, but really struggling to understand how it looks different from passive habit training to now becoming active passion or active parenting in your habit formation of your children? If so, I'd like to invite you to invest the next 20 minutes or so to stay with me as I help walk you through some key things that you need as a Charlotte Mason mama to instill the characters inside your children by first starting with you. I'm Dollie Freeman. I'm the host of the live and interacting show, The Charlotte Mason Way. I look forward to sharing with you the tips for today. And if you know of anyone who would benefit from mom habits, I'd encourage you to tag them in the comments and invite them to become your learning buddy for today's show. Speaking of today's show, let's talk about our actual topic of the day. We're going to be talking about the habits of active parenting. Before I get there, I want to share a little story about how it was when I began to realize that the chaos at our home, the endless friction, the being weary of all the mothering from the time my feet hit the floor to my pillow went to bed at night, and most of the time through the nights, I remember thinking to myself that how did it get this hard? How did I get this unsure of what I was doing as a mom? I was constantly yelling out, do this, do that. I was telling them, all the commands of a parent. And yet I didn't seem to be going anywhere. So I didn't really understand that line between parenting and habit formation. And there is a very thin line that we have to understand. And in that understanding, then I began to realize that I'm making it harder for myself because I'm not putting the ownership on our children. And I think it's my responsibility. There are key things that are my responsibility, but once we empower our children, they're going to be able to do far more than we expect. But here is the key aspect. We need to first train us as parents how to have philosophies in our parenting training that will give us habits of how we interact with our children all day long, how we're able to help and train them in their way. So I'd love for you to say hello as we get started. So the topic for today's show is the habit of active parenting. This is going to be a good one. You might want to take out some paper. This is something you most likely are going to want to take some notes on. So let me explain with you the very first step of the habits of active parenting. It's set expectations. We often get excited about what we want to accomplish as a mom. And oftentimes we say, you know what, I'm going to do this. And we just start plunging through and we kind of like get overzealous with the idea of what it's going to look like when it's all put together. And we get really excited. We get really hung-go and we just go crazy, right? Meanwhile, we leave our kids and our husbands behind. We don't really communicate with them what we're doing, what it's going to look like, how we're going to get there. We're just telling them, you're going to do this. And it's important that we kind of stop and we set expectations. What that looks like is communicating with your husband, saying, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make sure that there's good habits in our parenting, because guess what? It's not just mom, it's also dad. You guys need to be on the same parenting philosophy page. It will make you butt heads for years if you don't. I know, been there, done that. You need to understand, it's not about you telling your husband how to do something, but it's about explaining to your husband why you want to do something. Once the husband understands that underlying foundation of why certain things are important to the functions of the home and the habits that are going to be formed in parenting first, then they'll get on board. But I know for me, I would often go to my husband, we're going to do this, and this is how you do it, and all that stuff. And it took years for me to understand. He doesn't understand why we're doing this. He doesn't understand the philosophy behind these things. And so I had to explain different things with him. And I remember even just up to a few years ago, saying you really shouldn't do that with him. And here's why. And he's like, man, this Charlotte Mason thing is really starting to make sense to me now. all those years, he was kind of not fighting me. He just didn't understand it. And it felt like it was telling him how to parent. So share it with your husband. Help set the expectations for not just yourself, but for your husbands as well, your husband as well, so that you guys can be a unified team and you can go at this active parenting together. That way, when mom's away, dad can be aware of what's going on. And when mom's busy, doing whatever needs to happen, dad is aware of the habits that are being formed and how you work around them. So making sure you're communicating together as a team, a parenting team, will really benefit you in the long term because you're setting expectations as a couple, as a parenting team. It's very important. The second step to habits of active parenting is to get the child on board. If you don't get the child on board, it's going to be much harder, and it looks different based on the ages. So, when child's really young, getting them on board is not difficult because they want to please you. They want to please you in everything that they do. So getting them on board early is the key. But when you have children a little bit older and they're already in really bad habits, you need to correct that. And how you do that is explain what it is that you're doing, what it looks like, answering their questions, giving them, if you have any literal children like I do, making sure there's no gray areas, because gray areas can cause an issue. So it's not just for today, it's every day afterwards. It's not just in this situation, it's in every situation. So, setting the expectation for your children is getting them on board, but also helping them to understand that it looks like a certain way. I remember when I was training our younger kids in obedience, I decided, this is really hard to explain because they don't see me being obedient, except for my husband, and not all the time, So we had to demonstrate to them what obedience looked like and what first-time obedience looked like. So we played a game. You may be familiar with red light, green light. So we did that in our home, and I was showing them that when I say green light and you quickly go, that's obedience. And when I say red light and you quickly stop, that's obedience. That's first-time obedience. It's quick, it's purposeful, it's being attentive to what I'm saying. That will help a child to say, okay, that's what first-time obedience looks like. And this is what she's wanting. And then when you see a child, saying just a sec, well, that's what disobedience looks like because you're delaying it. And it's really important for them to have those visual cues to be able to say, that's what she expects. That's what she doesn't want to see. And the more you do that, the more you're going to get your child on board. And so answering their questions is important, but also getting that verbal, yeah, I agree, I'm going to do this, will help in the long term. And then making sure you're being positive with your child all along the way, praising their efforts, praising them for accomplishments, but being sure that you're not praising them for not fulfilling exactly what it looks like. So, if they really weren't first-time obedience, then you really shouldn't be praising them. Instead, you should say that really you delayed in obeying me. So giving them a full understanding, you may have delayed, but you got better in how little of a time you delayed. Giving them that full understanding. This is what mom expects. This is what it needs to look like. And yes, you're improving, but there needs to be more improvement going on. So number 3 for the habit of active parenting is to create parenting cues. Charlotte Mason tells us that we do not want to have perpetuals, commands of do this and don't do this and don't do this or that. What's important to understand is you do have to do that at the beginning. That's part of making sure your child goes the right way all the time. But perpetual means forever. If we're not training our children in habits, we're going to forever be saying, don't do this or do this. So we have to make sure they understand their boundaries. And giving our children parenting cues is going to start passing that ownership off to them. So what that might look like is, we were talking about obedience, so let's go there. If a child isn't obeying, a child just needs to be said, Manoa, and they would stop, and then they would process in their head, am I obeying or I'm not obeying? Sometimes when Manoah is just unclear as to what I'm saying, I would say, what do you think I would say to you? And then he would stop and process his actions, and he would know exactly what it is that I'm telling him. And then I'm saying, so what should you do instead? And with that, he's able to then self-manage and realize, oh, I'm going into disobedience. I need to do better. And so then he starts setting that up, and being able to say just one words or one sentence to help your child to understand. For instance, interruption is a big thing in our home. Growing up, I've worked from home. My husband works from home. So we have to have a tool to let our children know, stop interrupting, without it being a constant distraction in our day. So a perfect parenting cue is that use your interrupt rule. And they know exactly what that means. It means put your hand, well, we usually say down here, put your hand on, and I'll cover my hand to acknowledge that you want my attention. But until I give you my attention by looking at you, you don't have it, so you may not speak. So just saying, I've got it. And then we use up here to say, it's an emergency. I need your attention now. And that way, if we're in the middle of a conversation, a child puts a hand up here, knowing they've gone the right way, we can quickly give them that attention. So they're parenting cues. And I use those cues with my husband all the time when we're in the middle of conversations with adults. I'll place my hand on his leg to just let him know I need his attention. He doesn't always pay attention to that, but it's me showing our children that I use the same respect to others as well. And I find myself doing it when I'm in church and someone is in the middle of a conversation or out and about. I will lay my hand on their arm just to say, I want your attention. And when they look at me and they know, I just stand there patiently and wait. So you have to show your children the same actions you desire them to have, and take those time to say, in that discussion with your husband, when you set expectations, say, these are the problems we're having. What can we say? What one word, two words, small phrases, small sentences, what can we say to aid our children in taking ownership of their own habits? And then you become an active parent because you're actively parenting them. You're giving them a philosophy where you're actually their ally in habit formation. You're not, because I said so, it's my way or the highway. You're not butting heads. So that endless friction is beginning to disappear because now you've prepared yourself in becoming an active parent. You're beginning to be watchful. You're beginning to help your child not form those habits that will in fact lead to bad character, bad conduct. And that way you can actually start building those good things in place of it. So I actually have a resource for you. This is a Charlotte Mason's list of 100 habits. If you haven't gotten this yet, you're going to want to do it because it'll help you understand what habits to work on in your children. They're divided up based on different character traits. So some are habits, some are character traits, some are hygiene habits. Different habits that you're going to want your children to have before they graduate from high school. Some are very important early on. Some will become ones they can grow into. So you can download this at the charlottemasonway.com/100 habits. You want to grab that so that you have a guide to know what you're doing in your family. Now that you're becoming active in your parenting, you want to make sure that you're able to know what you want in your children and have the guide to say, you know what, our children are actually further along than we thought. That's what I love about that list is like, you can check it off and say, oh, we got that. This is a big one. So use your highlighters to highlight the ones that are important to you. Use a check or a black pen to check off the ones you've already done. Use it any way that you can to help you form those habits in your children. Our next episode, I'm going to be talking to you about the 2 factors of habit formation, and you don't want to miss it because these 2 things will be the evidence of what characters are being formed, what habits are being formed in your children. So you don't want to miss that. Next week, Wednesdays at 1:30, both on Facebook and YouTube. But right now, I want to get into the comments with you and answer your questions around today's episode. So, how can I help you become an active parent in the habits that you form to help get rid of that endless friction in your home? Hello, Stephanie and Secreta. I can't type that fast. Can you post the link? Absolutely, I can post the link. charlottemasonway.com/100 habits. There you go, Carly. I'm glad that you asked for the link. Sometimes I post it, sometimes I don't, but I always do when someone asks. So I'm glad to have you guys on here today. What questions can I help, or was one of the tips exactly what did you needed to know how to, reverse those passive habits we talked about last week on the show, and knowing how to stop being passive and let those habits form on their own, and how to become very active in your child's ally in habit formation. You're welcome, Carly. Stephanie says, how do I get a 4-year-old to use her words to express herself instead of getting angry when things don't go her way? Well, I know there's a lot of cards. I don't know how verbal your 4-year-old is. I know some 4-year-olds can talk up a storm where others not so much. It really goes on mostly about how your child understands. A lot of children know how to feel, but they don't know how to, I'm feeling upset. You have to kind of talk to them to let them know what it is that they're feeling and how to express it. Oftentimes, children want to, because it's frustrating to them to not be able to communicate. So you really have to help them by building a vocabulary to say, okay, you're feeling angry right now? What is making you angry? Why are you so upset? And oftentimes it could be the fact that they're really not sure how to communicate earlier on, when they were maybe a little frustrated or a little bothered at first, and not being able to communicate well leads to that anger. Some of it could be the fact that they're trying to get their way. So, getting to know your child is so important to understand how to help them communicate their feelings. And most of the time, it's the help with vocabulary and what it looks like. So there is a series called Help Me Be Good books that they're really old. I cannot remember who wrote them, but they share how it looks to be good and how it looks to be bad, and those different aspects, the opposite traits kind of things. But it's done for young kids, and it will help them to really see, that's what I'm feeling. And until they have a vocabulary to communicate, it's really hard for them. So I would walk through helping your child with that aspect, and do all you can to see the triggers before they happen, and then help them to say, okay, I can see they're getting a little bit of frustration, and help it before it gets there. So you want to try to help them learn how to self-manage through emotions. I'm ashamed I haven't been the best example, but trying to stay patient. Well, we talked about that last week. And if you're on my email list, you would have gotten about mom grace. We need to extend ourselves with mom grace for the mistakes that we've made, Stephanie. We all have made them. And what's really important is we learn from them. I have a temper. I grew up in a home where temper was displayed all the time. And so, it's taught. And it's caught. They're both, and so you have to be intentional about how you communicate to your child. And I find that when you find those parental cues and be able to use a phrase or something, it helps keep you calmer. Sorry, I have a cough drop because, man, my throat's been really scratchy lately. So you want to make sure that you have those parental cues. Those things have helped keep my anger at bay so that I can quickly help my children before frustration comes in. So do what you can to help your child while you're helping yourself in the process. Erin, This is an excellent resource. I just watched your last video before this live. Well, Erin, I'm glad you watched the last one because the last one kind of helps you understand it's us. We're the ones that need the habit training before we can help our kids. So I'm glad you did that. It is really important. And Erin also has a 4-year-old who might be considered explosive. I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but I know what that looks like. He has a hard time being patient. I have a 1-year-old and a 13-year-old with ADHD and on the spectrum. What I found is that teaching kids how to be patient in the moment is not teaching. You can't teach them when it's already happening. So you want to teach them to be patient through other things that are enjoyable. For instance, those things that you just think, I don't have patience to do that. Puzzles, the sewing, the cards with like the animal cards with the sewing, those things will help calm a person and will also help the focus on things. But I find that when you're working on something that takes more time, a puzzle being a perfect example. My husband always says, I don't have the patience for the puzzles. I don't know how you do. I grew up in a home we did puzzles. And so I enjoy it and I use it as a time to just kind of calm down. Definitely get some things for your child and use the word. Make sure you're using the words. Look how patient you are with that, and then they begin to see what that looks like. If you use the vocabulary, the child will understand what it looks like so that they're able to then demonstrate it to please mom and dad. That's just a natural thing children want to do when they're younger. So do what you can and demonstrate it. Definitely demonstrate it to them as much as you can. Say, man, this thing was getting to me, but I'm so glad I was patient because I was able to get through it. Begin using the words you want your children to understand and what it looks like with you. And you can also apologize. Apologizing to your family is one of the best tools you can have. It's like, forgive me for getting angry because I'm sorry I did that. I wasn't patient and I probably hurt your feelings. Make sure that they understand all of those words. And now they see mom doing it. Now they see you apologizing, and then they know that that's the way to do it. So definitely do those things. Yes, I have a few of those books. Stephanie, I'm glad you have them. I did read it. Thank you. I do need more mom grace. We all need mom grace. I tell you what, I have been parenting for 26 years, almost 27. And time and time again, sometimes I get mom guilt. And at the weirdest times, like I had a hysterectomy in April. I had mom guilt because I couldn't homeschool the way that I needed to homeschool during that medical health struggles that I was having. And after my surgery, my husband took me outside and I sat and I'm watching my son whittling a stick for the first time and using a electronic hand sander. And I was like, if it weren't for this hysterectomy, chances are he wouldn't have learned that, because now he's looking at daddy for, his ideas, and it really helped. And then this past week, I went away for a writing retreat. I was gone for 6 days. It was wonderful. But when I came back, Manoa had learned how to use electric carving tools. And so that was really cool. And so I'm learning how to get over my mom guilt. We all have these things, but we're learning just like our kids are learning. And so we need to learn how to do things that we were never taught. I was never taught patience. I was never taught how to be calm and pleasant. I was never taught how to teach habits. I was never taught habits. I wasn't passive, but not actively. So it's a lot that we have to learn. And then we're home with our kids all day, every day. So we have to be kind to ourselves. But the time not to have grace to us is when we're in the middle of training our children. We have to be active parents. And the more we're there, the better. And whenever I have chaos starting to go in my home, I'm like, oh, mom's not consistent. That's what's going on here. I need to buckle down and be active in my parenting. Erin says, we do have several of those things you listed, but have not used them yet. I will put that in our daily box. I need to model patience is key, right? We need to model everything. We hear the thing when adults get upset at other adults, do as I say, not as I do. Children get frustrated with that very same thing. So we need to help them see that we're doing something that we want them to do as well. So if we can get that, training out of our head, that mindset that we can do things and expect differently from our kids, it's not going to happen that way. We're showing them a habit that they're going to catch at some point. So we need to try our hardest to make that happen. So next week, I want you guys to show up because we're going to talk about those things that are evident of what kind of habits are being formed. And it's really important that you have a pulse on your home, not just your habit, not just your children's habits, but how your habits interact with yourselves and as a family unit, as well as out in the community and the society. So I hope you show up for that one. It's really good. And I hope the series of habit topics are really helping y'all just get really motivated. We're all motivated in New Year. And it all starts with us moms. Charlotte Mason says, we can raise our children up to anything we want them to be because we have that power in us. We just know how to tap into it, and then we'll be free to go and have a good time. Erin says, I am having trouble slowing down and just recently have acknowledged my passive parenting. Yeah, sometimes we need it to kind of smack us in the face. And honestly, I felt like I was punched in the gut when I realized that years ago when I was reading Charlotte Mason's original series. So it's hard when we do that, but it's the first step to changing is when you find out it's your habits that have made the difference. Sarita, yep, so true. I need to be consistent and model what I want them to be or them to do. And it's true. And, we can always be better tomorrow. Starting today, we can make tomorrow's better. And every day just keeps getting better the more we are involved and actively parenting our children the way that we want them to be. Thank you guys for interacting. It's the favorite part of the show is to be in conversations with you all. So thank you for that. I look forward to next time, and be sure to invite your friends that you think might be in need of this. I hope to actually have more interactions and more conversations in these. So look forward to it. Before I go, I want to say hello to Stacy. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Thank you for raising awareness on this. I have been struggling for a while with this. It's been hard to acknowledge, but good for all of us. Keep practicing. Yes. And you're welcome. I know how important it is. I say this often, you can plan the perfect Charlotte Mason homeschooling year, but if your habits get in the way, you're never going to get it done. So it's all about setting those foundations of habits in your home so that your plans can get done. And that way you can raise self-educating children. All right, y'all. Until next time. Bye for now.